I'm Lauren Papps, and I'm a program officer in the Journalism and Media program at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. In MacArthur's Journalism and Media program, we fund quality, fact-based, independent media that, like Tribal Justice, tells underreported stories that make us think differently, critically, and deeply about the challenges facing our nation and the world. Tribal Justice examines what happens when court systems are designed with a central goal of keeping the communities they serve together and strong. Tribal Justice has shown at the Full Frame Documentary Film Festival, the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival, and the Brooklyn Film Festival, among many others, and it had its public television broadcast premiere in August on PBS's POV. After the film, we invite you to stay for a panel discussion featuring the Honorable Claudette C. White, Chief Judge for the Quechan Tribal Court, featured in the film, and Ann Makepeace, the documentary's director, along two Safety and Justice Network members, Kathleen Littleleaf, Native Outreach lead researcher for the Missoula County Detention Center in Missoula, Montana, and Eric Brings White, advisor, counsel to the Rapid City Chief of Police in Pennington County, South Dakota. At this point, I'd like you to make sure that you have silenced your mobile phones. And now, Tribal Justice.
With us, Ann Makepeace, writer, producer, and an award-winning director. There's more information about each of the panelists in the conference app, so we'll just briefly introduce everyone. And then next to Ann is Judge Claudette White, who you all know. She's the chief judge of the Quechan Tribal Court and has been since 2006. Next to Judge White is Kathleen Littleleaf, who is a chemical dependency counselor and mental health therapist working in the Missoula County Detention Center, and she is also a member of the Blackfoot tribe. Next to Kathleen is Eric Brings White, who is a member of the Community Advisory Council to the Rapid City Police Department. Each of the panelists are going to get a chance to react to the film, and then afterwards we'll save some time for Q&A. So I hope you will jump in with questions when the panelists are done. I'll start with you, Ann, with just a simple, what led you to make the film Tribal Justice?
So before I get into that, I just really want to thank you, Patrick, and Lauren from the MacArthur Foundation for bringing me here, but also to the foundation for supporting the film, because the film would not be here today, would not be finished were it not for the MacArthur Foundation. So thank you for that. And I'm just really honored to be presenting the film in front of an audience of people who actually can make a difference on the ground. So that's really, it's just very moving and validating for me for all the 4 years of work I put into this, blood, sweat, and tears. It's just really wonderful to have it be presented and used in this way. So thank you. So I'm really a storyteller. It doesn't happen that I say, I have to make a film about, tribal justice. It's more, who are the people that I'm going to be following? Are there stories that are going to compel audiences to watch? And then what kind of impact, can this film make a difference? Can it be used for good? So those are the kinds of things that lead me to make a film like this. And I've made films about a lot of different things. I've made films about refugees resettling in the United States. I've made a film about brainwashing in a religious cult. So they range all over. I have done a number of films on Native American stories. My most recent film before this was about the return of a native language. And I think it was because of that film that Ruth Cowan, the executive producer, heard about me when she had the idea of making a film about tribal courts and tribal justice. And so she came to me, and my first reaction was, well, I don't really know anything about tribal courts. But then the fact is that when I start out on a film, I generally don't know very much anyway, and I love the research, and I love digging in, and I love discovering new worlds and meeting new people. So the question was really more, well, who is it we're going to be following? You know, are there people whose stories can be compelling to audiences for 90 minutes who are going to stay with it and learn from it? And so I told Ruth, who became, she's a political scientist who became our executive producer, if you want to cover a trip out to California to meet the two judges that had been suggested to her, I'm in. Let's go and see. So first I met Claudette, and I thought, oh, this, you know, how great, you know, I mean, I was just really impressed and bowled over by her dedication and the work she's doing and what the court was about. And then I met Abby, and so it was like, okay, I'm hooked. What could I do? So that's really what led me to make the film. It also, I needed to know we could have access, because I didn't really want to make biographies of the two judges. I wanted to show their work in action. And so that meant being able to film in their courts and have access to the stories of people who were coming before them. And both Abby and Claudette were open to that, and so that's made a big difference. So those are the things that brought me to the film in the first place, but as I delved deeper and deeper into the research and learning about, you know, and observing their two courts, I realized, you know, what an incredible model for restorative justice in the wider justice system. So that's really what kept me going over the 4 years of making the film. And it's really wonderful now to see the impact that it is having. It's actually screening tonight at the annual conference of the Native American Indian Court Judges Association. Richard Blake is introducing it tonight. So it's having, and that's just one, it's also screening at the National Congress of American Indians Conference on, I think it's the 19th. So it's having a lot of impact in Native communities, but also it's screening in a couple weeks at Yale Law School. It's screened at a number of law schools, so I'm hoping that it will influence, you know, young people coming up into the justice system. We're planning screenings at the Department of Justice. So my hope for the film is that it will change some hearts and minds, inspire people. I know everybody here probably is looking at restorative justice or using, I know specifically some people that I do know here from the Center for Court Innovation, the kind of work that they're doing, including peacemaking, modeled on Native American practices. So I just hope this will spread and spread, and the tribal justice the film will continue to have that the kind of impact to make that happen more and more.
Thank you.
So.
Our audience and the people who are attending this conference are primarily sort of, I'll just call them mainstream justice people. In other words, they work for those state courts that were kind of in the background of the film. What has been, you've done screenings in law schools and in Brooklyn, you mentioned. I mean, in screenings where mainstream justice people were in the audience, what has been their reaction?
It's been incredibly positive. We had a screening in Michigan with former Michigan Supreme Court judges, state court judges, and people working in tribal courts all together. And it's been, I don't know, I've not had any negative comments. I've only had, you know, and a number of people working in state courts have expressed a wish that they could do more in this vein. But I don't know, it's only been positive. Have you been in screenings where
I have been in several screenings with some of the state tribal court forums, and the responses we get have been very positive, but I think they've been very receptive from the state judiciary in terms of recognizing the kind of work that we do and the differences. We do a lot of collaboration work and work together when we can, but they're actually looking at tribal courts as models to find out what they can take away and what might be working there. And that's actually a change from things that have occurred in the past. And not to be negative in any sense, but the reality that tribal courts often deal with is they're not considered to be real courts. They're not recognized, and there is a real lack of faith often in the state judicial system within tribal courts. When they look at transfers or they have to look at working with tribes, there's a lot of resistance. And so there's a lot of work that has to occur on the tribal court side, at least I know for myself, constantly trying to educate, reach out to the state judiciary and my counterparts to educate them about our processes, to educate them even about what the law says within the different municipalities around us, constantly working to inform them about what their own laws say, about what they're supposed to do when we deal with some of the issues that mutually affect us, especially when we're dealing with cases involving domestic violence that are covered under the Violence Against Women Act, covered under state law. And we're constantly facing resistance. And so with the film that we have completed, as well as the efforts to collaborate, we're now seeing a lot of changes in the positive sense, whereas before it just might be the tribal courts fighting some of those municipalities or law enforcement in our areas. Now we're actually teaming up together with our state counterparts and informing them about, no, this is what you must do. And actually getting the kind of recognition that should be occurring already with you know, state and federal law. So we're seeing a lot of positive change and growth in terms of what the film has been able to offer.
So the sad part of the film was the part about your nephew. Would you mind giving us an update on your nephew?
Sure. Isaac just got out of custody about 3 weeks ago. He got out with, I think, $80 to his name, paid for a bus ticket from Tucson to Phoenix, Arizona, and enrolled into a halfway home. I was prison blues and an ID, and that was it. As soon as he got there, he called me to let me know that he had gotten there. We had been corresponding with him while he was in custody, trying to provide him resources, and it didn't work out in the halfway home. They gave him like a week to find employment. If he didn't find employment within a week, he was going to be kicked out of the home. And so that actually occurred within the week, like they said, and it wasn't for a lack of effort, but somebody coming with, you know, a felony history background, no education in terms of no high school diploma or GED behind him, no work experience. It's been difficult for him to find employment just within that first week, and he has been able to actually get situated with my sister, who lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and he actually just for the first time seen the film about 3 weeks ago. He got out, I think, on a Wednesday, and that Friday we were screening at Arizona State University College of Law. I told him, hey, this is a perfect opportunity, you know, you can come and see the film. And he was excited about it, and we, you know, got to reunite there. After the film, I approached him and I asked him, so what did you think? And he was very somber and sad. And I said, oh, what's wrong? You know, you didn't like it? And he was like, no, I really liked it, Auntie. He said, I feel really ashamed of myself. I feel embarrassed about the way I behaved, and I never realized how much people loved me and how much people cared about me. He said, and I feel really ashamed of what I've done and how much I hurt people. I didn't realize how much I hurt people. And so it was a good opportunity for him to see that and to learn from that. And it was interesting because when he seen the film, he was actually able to see and hear about the efforts that my family had made, myself and my brother, to try to get him out of the state system when his mother lost him to the welfare agencies. And we had done background checks, we had made contact with the caseworker, even just asking for visitation, and we didn't even get that. He was in the state system for a period of time. I mean, I'd call a social worker regularly and constantly asking even just for visitation with him, and we didn't get it. And he heard it for the first time in the film, you know, that we had made those efforts, and you heard his comment saying, you know, 5 or 6 years, you know, why should they care now? And
Yeah.
it was kind of like a healing process for him, I think, in seeing the film.
I actually didn't notice that the first time that I saw the film, but the second time I realized that that was what he was talking about.
Right.
Yeah, I really hope that he's going to be okay. But I mean, I think you said at one point in the film that the state failed him, and I think there's a strong argument in favor of that. But really what happened with the other two cases, the family reconciliation case and the case of the Yurok tribe member up in Northern California, was that the two systems, the state system and the tribal system, had a sort of bridge between them, and that you weren't quite able to bridge the systems in your nephew's case. Can you talk about what it takes to bridge the two systems?
It takes communication, I think, is probably the most critical thing that it takes in terms of us talking to one another, talking to the state judiciary, meaning not just even the tribal court, but our tribal social service agencies, working with the state agencies to communicate and talk about what kind of services we have on reservation, how we might be able to assist in terms of providing something more culturally appropriate to the family in terms of services. Sometimes even when things occur off reservation, like in Isaac's instance, the dynamics weren't able to all be shown within the film just based on timing. But Isaac's mother and her two brothers were foster children for my family. We got the oldest of the children, I think, when he was about 6 years old, and he came to live with our family, and he grew up with us, and I think he was a teenager, about 15 or 16, and they lost their biological mother. They came from a family of 12, all of them in state care. And so sometime during that time frame, he had actually met Isaac's mother for the first time. My brother did, my foster brother did. He had never known her. They were all in within the state system in California. Mom was in CYA at the time and had been on a runaway status, and my mother, who was a single parent, actually provided health care services on an outpatient basis to their grandmother, and met Isaac's mother and brought her home to meet her brother for the first time, and told her, you know, if you're interested in coming to live with us, we will try to get you. And she did get her for a period of time. The film cuts in and out a little bit in terms of what they're talking about, her getting pregnant and then leaving. She actually went back into state care by her own choice. She was having a hard time following the rules of her home, went back into state care. But so they had a long history of being in the state system in that process, no nexus with the tribe, no real communication other than the efforts we individually made to bring them back into the tribe. And so it's just kind of generational when you see it occurring. And the same thing ended up happening with, you know, her own children. She ended up being in Arizona in the Tucson area, and she lost Isaac, his older brother, and 4 younger siblings to the state system. And the sad thing about it is they went through the process and tried to reunify. I think her husband got 4 of the children, but she had her own 2 children, who was Isaac's older brother, and Isaac's older brother ended up aging out of the system. Isaac and his mom returned to our reservation while under the jurisdiction of the state of Arizona, with no types of services, no wraparound services, no case plan that was being complied with, and no follow-up to ensure that those things were being done. And so when he was back home on our reservation, he was basically on his own, making his own decisions in a homeless situation. You know, he was not in a home regularly cared for, and he had been homeless. So when I talk about what I had heard about him, I mean, that was very much happening. When I talked about him having his own blanket in his own bed, we had actually seen him and his brother, they walked by my home during the evening at Christmas time, and I had stopped him and told him, hey, where are you guys heading? They're, oh, Auntie, and they ran over to see us, and we got pizza, and we were putting up Christmas lights and decorating a tree, and they kept looking at the clock and, you know, watching the clock, and I was asking, do you need to be somewhere? They said, no, but we need to get home. There's like 10 people in the house, and if we don't get home, we don't have a place to sleep, and we don't have a blanket. We'll have to sleep outside in the car. And so those were his circumstances, and mind you, this is while Isaac was under state care. And so there was no follow-up, no interaction with Mom or Isaac to find out, you know, where he was, what was occurring. when they ended up going back for a review hearing, the state of Arizona dismissed his case, saying he was no longer in their jurisdiction, rather than creating the nexus and the relationship with the tribe and reaching out and either asking the tribe to take the case formally and transfer jurisdiction to ensure that he was properly cared for. They did nothing other than dismiss his case. And so absolutely his case could have ended up in a different result if they made a better effort. And after that period of time, he continued to be homeless and on his own for about a period of a year.
I wonder if specifically in California and Arizona, this film might change some minds about, you know, about the bridge possibility. I would
the
hope
literal
so.
bridge across the river?
Yeah, I mean, there was that literal bridge. But I want actually maybe we can talk about it later, maybe. But I'm curious to know: is your nephew now faced with the inability to leave Arizona? And
Yeah,
cross?
he's faced with the
So
issue to leave Arizona, and then
that's
you've
almost
seen in
too
the film,
perfect.
right? Then when you've seen in the film, he literally could not cross that bridge. Arizona is on one side and California is on the other side of the bridge, and that's reservation land. And we've been pushing within the Arizona State Tribal Court Federal Forum to ask for a radius to be in place and for the relationships and MOUs or whatever we need to put in place between the tribe and the state to allow them to, you know, apprehend or to go through an extradition process if we can just give them the opportunity to be on reservation where they have services, they have family, because to expect somebody to be able to support themselves, have residence in a state when they have no employment is just unrealistic. We're just basically setting them up for failure, and you know that's what I was concerned about in Isaac's case. But we are advocating for that one change we have seen in terms of you're saying, is it making a change in California based on the relationship in our jurisdiction? We have just under 4,000 members, predominantly most of those people and families reside on reservation. We have 2 children in state court under dependency, only 2.
Wow.
And that was when we had first started, or I had first started, we had right under 40 cases in state dependency. And so right now what we're trying to do is we're trying to collaborate. They have a liaison in Imperial County that works very closely with our social service agency, determining who will or who won't pick up a case. And so sometimes the children that may have been in the state system end up in the tribal system as opposed to the state system, just by communicating and talking and getting better outcomes when we communicate and work together.
Well,
That's amazing.
I mean, one of the things that the Safety and Justice Challenge is about, I think, is getting collaborations together and talking about bridging across systems and trying things. And we have Kathleen with us here from Missoula, Montana, who is with an innovation site, who is innovating. And I think it's we talked on the phone before this panel about your project, and it's a little bit of an effort to get a bridge started. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it is definitely an effort to get a bridge started. So in the community that I'm serving is in Missoula County in Montana, and so I'm not located, you know, amongst a reservation or within a reservation boundaries. I'm in, you know, urban setting. So one of the things that I see that's positive in regards to what Missoula County is doing is it is acknowledging the high recidivism rate overall within the city, for sure, because there's a high recidivism rate. We have overpopulated county jails. We're now in a position where we're sharing space, so that would mean that our inmates would locally, if there's no space within that jurisdiction or tribal jail, then they would relocate to another area. So there's definitely issue in regards to Native American recidivism. You know, we're a small population, and I don't have those statistics in front of me, but we are a small population overall across the state of Montana. But in regards to the incarceration rate, it's almost looking like half of us are incarcerated. So it's a high population. We are overrepresented in the detention centers. So my role right now within the Innovation Fund is to research and be able to implement some data, implementing some, and by that, what we're doing is we're surveying or interviewing about, our goal was 50, I think it's 30 inmates who identify as Native American. And what we're trying to do really is get their story in regards to what are some of those obstacles, what are some of those issues, how are they being culturally supported within the county detention center, what are some programs, what do they identify as obstacles, what do they identify as needs that can definitely help them, do something, work through and have that support. What are those resources? So we're talking within the institution or the county detention center itself, but as well as what are some of those resources outside. So when they are released at some point, what are some of the issues, what's happening in their life. So we're trying to, I think is really positive because we're getting their perspective, we're getting their side, their story.
And what will you do with their story?
And exactly, and based on what we received, the outcome of the interviews is, our goal is to be able to, we will be meeting with county officials to present that data, to present that information and be able to hopefully, work towards bridging that gap. But there is so many players, and I like what the film had acknowledged in that, in regards to state, and you're talking tribal, but definitely there's so many players involved in someone who's struggling within the criminal justice system. And it is really hard to navigate, for sure. So being able to, my hope is through the data, through the interviews, be able to present something that's going to, make things shift, to identify resources or implement those resources. And, definitely overall, we're hearing those stories of those inmates. The other two pieces of the grant that we're implementing is cultural programming. So who I'm working with right now is Kevin Kicking Woman. We're both Blackfoot, Blackfeet tribal members. We're implementing cultural programming within the detention center itself. So it's definitely new because there hasn't been any kind of cultural programming. So we implement culturally based or tribally based 12-step meetings. We implement, I do a Mending Broken Hearts, which is a intergenerational trauma, grief and loss group that is Native based. Kevin implements the Regaining the Warrior culturally based program. So right now we're in the midst of being in the detention center weekly and implementing these programs. The other thing that we're going to be doing is doing some cultural trainings or cultural sensitivity trainings for the detention center staff, just to be able to share that, there is a difference here in regards to Native people and non-Native. And there are some tribal differences. There is a different worldview, there's different needs, and be able to share that knowledge and, again, hopefully, to impact and change people's minds, to address those stereotypes and, just misinformed, along the way, how things have happened historically. Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to give Eric a chance to weigh in here. Eric, I feel like you represent a kind of bridge in that you are one of the advisors from the tribal community to the Rapid City Police Department. So it's like you have one foot on each shore. Can you talk about what that's like and how that works?
Yes, sir. I'd like to first say that Pennington County just adjacent to the Indian reservations where I live. I live on Pine Ridge, South Dakota. But I also live on the north side of Rapid City. And that's probably similar to a lot of the tribal people. They're just fluid, maintaining that, that home. And so Pennington County is I think, unique because they believe that community participation and community involvement is integral to these changes. And like a lot of tribal people, we believe that we also should be at the table when these changes are discussed, especially changes that are going to affect us. And, Pennington County has been remarkable in being inclusive and their outreach and giving people like myself and a few others. So, a lot of the tribal communities, we like soup, right? Well, if you look at it like Pennington County's making this soup, and it's a soup that everyone could draw from. And I'm just one of those ingredients of that soup.
All right. Well,